First question today, how to overcome anxiety at work. There are always numerous things to do all at once. My anxiety flares up and my brain says, I'm out of here. Then things don't get done, deadlines get missed, more tasks pile up and the anxiety increases. It's hurting my career. Anything that can help? All right. You want to jump into that, Mike?
Yeah, I'll love to. I'm the king of creating anxious situations in the workplace. There's a kind of personality, I'd say, that tends to push ourselves to the absolute maximum. We know that we're capable of a lot, but when it comes to our ability to be emotionally resilient in high stress situations, we tend to exceed our own abilities. And my whole life, I have done this. Now, any of you who've been in this experience, you know that you do grow to an extent, but it is possible to burn out, to absolutely burn out, to crash and burn, to see major projects fail, to get fired, to create huge unnecessary workplace conflicts, or to overlook critical issues or relationships that end up just blowing up in your face at some point. None of us need any of that to happen. I think what it really comes down to is understanding where your anxiety level is at and coming in just under that on a regular basis. For me, there are a lot of specific things that I would do that would create anxiety. Number one, I didn't know how to say no. I'd always accept any project anyone threw at me, whether or not it was reasonable, whether or not I had time, whether or not it conflicted with other things I needed to do. I felt somehow that was my job as an employee, was to do everything I was asked of. That is not the case. Your job is to benefit the company. And if you are accepting projects and directives from 3 different bosses, you cannot help your company in a meaningful way. And it's up to you to set frame there. Dan, I actually suggest we kind of ping pong back and forth on some of our top tips. I think that's my number one, is learn to say no, know your limits, be prepared to have basic confrontations. It doesn't need to be a big deal. You can basically say, hey, can you please check with my boss on this? That's Bob. Bob is my boss. And make sure that he's, where he wants this in the priority with all the other things that he has me doing. That's one of the best things that you can do is identify your boss and direct everyone else to them rather than just taking on new work.
Yeah, I'd springboard off that to kind of, you have to identify why it's happening. And there's usually 2 reasons. There's the reason that it started happening, and then the second reason, which is the side effects of the anxiety. So the anxiety creates its own anxiety. Like you delay on work, you end up doubling your workload. Now that makes you anxious. So it's important to sort of separate, okay, my reaction to anxiety, the running away kind of effect is actually what creates it in the, tomorrow's anxiety. But what was the initial cause? And when we look at, say, a concept of not saying no, I think we really come to the umbrella of people pleasing. 9 times out of 10, in my opinion, if you're anxious at work because of workload, it's a people pleasing problem. It's the other 10%, it's you're in the wrong job and your brain's just reacting to that. It hates being there and it just wants you to leave, and it's giving you a very good sign. And often there's overlap, it's both. But not saying no is part of a greater, umbrella of issues that come from wanting to please everybody, wanting to be seen as the good employee, wanting to be seen as having good reputation or being of value. And the tragic irony is that your reaction to those needy urges usually leads you to engage in behavior that's going to make you less in those areas. You're actually kind of shooting yourself in the foot. If you don't say no to anyone, you're not going to do anything to a high level of excellence. You should be saying no to most of the stuff that comes your way. So the few things that you say yes to you smash them out of the park. And that's how you get a good reputation. But a good reputation doesn't come from saying yes to everybody or trying to make people like you. So ultimately, I'd say there's two ways to deal with this. One is to learn how to deal with the in-the-moment anxiety, mindfulness, breathing, that kind of stuff, resetting your workload, practical exercises. But the bigger piece of work needs to be the people-pleasing. You deal with that, then you deal with this by default. That would be my first thought on it.
Yeah, I quite like that. In fact, expanding on both of these, the entire concept of setting boundaries is so central to managing your own anxiety. The tendency for me was I loved hitting it out of the park. I really loved being that guy that everybody wanted to stand up and cheer for, but that just meant I got more requests. I ended up with more bosses, more projects. Look what Mike can do. Let's give him more. How much can we load this guy down with? And at first I loved it until one day I didn't. It was really hard. It was really stressful. It was too much. And now I had created these expectations that I could deliver magic continually. And it was overwhelming. It was way more stress than I needed. So there were two boundaries I needed to set. One was with everyone else, really letting them know how much time I had, who manages my schedule and my priorities list, letting them even know what I was particularly good at and could help them with, and what I really wasn't that interested in or wasn't that skilled at, that they should probably find someone else to do. Just being very clear and honest and straight front up about that. I'm here to help you if you need me, but if you can find someone else, that would be a better choice. It'll happen faster and better. But I also needed to set boundaries with myself. I had to make certain that I wasn't pursuing that people-pleasing gratification, that sense of security, and that high serotonin you get out of the validation from other people on your victories. It's very addictive. And it's something that you really do have to watch out for, because ultimately you will crucify yourself on your own successes by creating this unrealistic, unsustainable work environment that you created, right? No one else did that. You invited it. And I didn't see that at the beginning, but it became clear quickly enough.
Yeah, that's a really key point. Just because you can handle it now doesn't mean it's sustainable. And you set a precedent, and people will adjust to your precedent. You know what? I think the thing that comes out of this most clearly, I can't think of anyone who's good at setting boundaries and has high anxiety. I can't think of anyone. And I can think of a lot of the opposite, almost to 100% degree. Somebody who's really bad at setting boundaries has a lot of anxiety. And I don't think that's some random coincidence or even a correlation. I think that's cause and effect. If you can manage, the boundaries start with yourself. It starts with you being honest with yourself about how you sacrifice your own well-being in order for these kind of needy outcomes of pleasing others and looking like the good person. And, it can start from a great place. Like, I want to do well in this job. And then it kind of bleeds into an unhealthy area. It's in the details, isn't it? Like, someone goes, "Oh, do you mind just grabbing that?" And you think, "Oh, that's nothing." And then you add another nothing and then another nothing. And now you got 16 nothings, and you've got 4 hours worth of work added to your week. And suddenly it's a big deal. There's also in the micro details, like for me, I couldn't ignore emails. So the thing would ping, the little envelope symbol would pop up, and I just had to read it, even though it took me away from my task, totally wrecked my flow. I wouldn't do anything about the email. I'm just checking to make sure nobody's upset with me. And then I'd come back to my work and have to slowly crank start to get back into it. One of the first things I did when I tried to work through my people pleasing was I only answered emails twice a day. And I actually had an autoresponder. I got this from Tim Ferriss, 4-Hour Workweek. I had an autoresponder that says, "I only answer emails from this time to this time. So please be patient and wait for a thing." And that added 4 hours to my week, just that. And I was like, wow, I can't believe how high impact that is. But overall, it's not about the little details. This isn't going to This isn't going to change with time management tools and tips. It's a deeper core issue about people pleasing, most likely. That being said, I know the person who asked this question, and they're actually in the other category as well, or maybe more so. They were in a job they fucking hated. And their anxiety wasn't saying, oh no, you got to get all the work done. It was saying, I hate this job. Stop doing this stuff. This is very unsatisfying. There's no point to it. It's miserable. I hate being here. That's a different kind of anxiety. That's what I'd call quite helpful anxiety. It's anxiety saying what it's supposed to say. You're missing an important point here, you know. And I don't know, would it be fair to say that a majority of people are not exactly in their dream job, that they're in something just for the money, or they can be in a great job, but there's this chunk of it that they're forced to do and it really doesn't align with their values and they wouldn't ever choose to do it if they ran the business themselves, you know, the bureaucracy and meetings and fucking admin or whatever. There's bits of it they don't like. And so you can start asking yourself, like, how do I get those bits down to bare minimum? Can I give them to other people? Can I pay someone else to do them? Can I just stop doing them and nothing really goes wrong? And just create more enjoyment at work. Because I think enjoyment is absolute medicine for anxiety.
You should absolutely love going to work. And if you don't, there's probably something that you can improve there. You know, I was just reflecting, you know, even the most skilled and adept people I know, you take a professional juggler who's just insane, but you keep chucking more balls at him. Here's another one. Here's another one. At some point, his anxiety level is going to go way out. Our brains are very limited. We can only handle a few things. And if you don't respect your own limits, your own comfort level of what you're capable of what you're able to track at any given time, of how many items you can have on your to-do list or how many meetings you can have on your schedule, you are going to feel anxious and you're not going to be effective. And that brings up another key point here, I think, which is just like you, Dan, like having the autoresponder and focusing on how often you would allow yourself to be distracted. Distractions for me are one of my greatest sources of anxiety for two reasons. One, they always feel like an emergency, and they usually come in groups of 3 or 4. So they even distract you from each other. You're answering 3 emails at once, right? Meanwhile, I'm supposed to be doing something else. But because they're interruptive, they also create this huge stress around completing the original main thread of work that you're working on. And I do a very similar thing. I tend to group together the distracting tasks to minimize them. All of my email communications, all of my texting contact, all of my scheduling, meetup contacts, they all happen in the morning before I start my work day. Once I start writing, phone is off, email is closed for hours. And that is the only way I can really get a lot done. And I get a lot done in those few hours. It's amazing how much you can do once you subtract the distraction. But the best advantage out of practicing this way isn't just the efficiency, it's the enjoyment. It's the fact that I just don't feel stressed. I enjoy the working and I enjoy answering the emails. But when I try to do them at the same time, extremely high stress, zero enjoyment. All I can do is think of, I need to go out and get a coffee and stop work altogether, which is, of course, isn't going to solve anything as a long-term pattern.
Yeah, and I think just to sort of wrap it up with a final point, there's a absolute myth about multitasking. There is no such thing as multitasking. There's what looks like 2 tasks being done at the same time, but in terms of the way your brain works, there's only ever one thing being done at a time, and you flicker between the 2. Not only do you lose time in those flickers, so if you're answering emails while editing a video, your video, email, and that space in between is lost time, but you're also restarting the task hundreds, thousands of times. And the restart, it's like starting a car. It burns more fuel. It starts from cold to hot And you can do it. You can notice yourself do it. Like you get back to the email, you're like, what the fuck was this about again? There's this little like catch-up thing. Thousands of those a week equals hours. And not just hours, but the sense that you're not getting anything done. It feels really uncomfortable when you first try doing this, at least it did for me. But when you sit to one thing at a time, no matter how many emergencies seem to be thrown at you, and you say, I'll get to them when this thing is done, to have these pieces of work that you go chunk, done, it feels very, very satisfying, very productive, and it is very productive. You know, I can look at my workday as a whole group of tasks and be overwhelmed by it, but if I just start chunking through them one focus point at a time, I'm done by like 11:30. I'm like, I thought, fuck, that looked like 2 days worth of work. But it would have been if I tried to do it all at once. You know, but I do it just focused. It's amazing how much more efficient that is. You can't see it until you do it. And there's a kind of an inverted pyramid, which is the stuff you need to do most goes at the top and gets the most of your mental bandwidth. And then you taper down to the bottom. And you'll realize that, no, they're not all emergencies. In fact, almost none of them are. There are a few things that are urgent or important to your work being valuable. And it's less than 10% of your list of tasks, maybe less than 5. Usually it's just one thing. If you're a salesperson, it's getting on the phone. You know, if you're a coach, it's reaching out to someone and serving someone. If you're a builder, it's picking up a piece of wood and cutting it in half. Like there are certain tasks that nothing else really matters compared to those. You can be behind on your emails or your billing or your admin, and nobody dies and nothing goes wrong unless it happens for a very long time. But you miss that big thing, or you leave it to the end of the day when you're all worn out and full of shit in your head, then your business is going to suffer, then your work's going to suffer, and your reputation with it.
Yeah, one final thing to add there. So if any of you are really struggling with this kind of intense, stressful work environment or life, right? Can happen outside of work as well. Boundary setting, first thing to look at. Handling any people-pleasing tendencies that you have, very critical. But also look at a thing called the Eisenhower grid. You can find it online very easily. Essentially, it's an arrangement of all of your tasks on 2 axes, what's important and what is critical right now. And during World War II, Eisenhower used this grid to prioritize what he's paying attention to. It had 4 quadrants, and the only things he would do are things that were both urgent and important. Nothing else caught his attention. And it worked. And this is the essential lesson, I think, is if you're out of balance, most likely you're doing things you don't need to be doing. Other people could be doing them better. You've taken on too much. You're not able to say no. You're doing it for the wrong reasons, such as social validation and approval, rather than because this is good for your job, good for what you're delivering, good for your company. So step back, have a look, and look for those gaps, and you should be able to sort things out pretty smoothly, pretty quickly.
Well, I think we could keep going on, but we've covered the key points that we believe in, going to hit the mark there, and it's really mostly about self-respect, confronting, boundary setting, and prioritization.